Hello again, everyone. Murray here from RPM Training with another segment in our business management training for automotive shop owners. Last time we were talking about service gross profit margins, and today we're going to talk about parts gross profit margins. As you can see on my screen here, we're going to be talking about how to measure it, manage it, and how to improve it. First thing we have to discuss is the difference between markup and gross profit margin. This is a common misconception in our industry, and it causes a lot of automotive shop owners to lose a lot of money for not understanding this principle. So here's the math that we're going to do to understand it. So as an example, you buy a part from a supplier for $100, that's your cost. If you use markup, you multiply it by 50% markup. The question is, what would you sell it for? You would sell it for $150. All right. Now, that's the retail price that you come from that calculation. The next question is, what is your profit on that transaction? Well, your profit is $50. The way you figure out your gross profit margin is to divide your profit by your retail price. So 50 divided by 150, and that equals 33.33% gross profit on parts. So there are some of you out there who are thinking that you are making a 50% gross profit margin, when in reality you are only making a 33.33% gross profit on parts, and that is significantly lower than you need to be profitable in this industry. So it's really important that we aim for between 45 and 50 gross profit margin. And so what we want to do is learn how to use our software programs to calculate margin. Make sure that whatever brand of software you use is set to margin and not set to markup, because that's going to be a mistake. So if we're going for the lower end of my benchmark of 45%, you would have to mark it up by 82%. That whole markup piece can be very confusing. And so we use a different tool that most software programs that you use in your shops, you can bring this into your software. And we're going to call it a parts matrix. Like I said earlier, the benchmark is 45 to 50. 45 these days is getting to be a little bit on the low end for the gross profit dollars that we need to maintain our profitability. But it depends on the mix of work, the type of vehicles that you're working on, maybe even some of the marketplace that you may be in. But we coach, close to 100 shops, and a good third of them are on the higher range of the 50% gross profit margin. So it is doable. And we'll talk about some ways on how to achieve that and maintain that. Now, this matrix that is shown here is based on several principles. One is that we want to achieve a gross profit margin, and there's a mathematical principle that you divide your cost by the opposite of the margin that you want to achieve. The other principle is that we make a lot more gross profit percentage on small items and then less as the items get larger in expense. So let's just take a look at the penny to $2.99. We want to achieve a gross profit margin of 80%, and so we divide our cost by 0.2 or by 20%. So in this case, $2.99 divided by 0.2 gives us $14.95. That is our gross profit. That's our selling price, and then our gross profit is the difference between $14.95 and $2.99. So roughly around $12 is our gross profit, which is the 80%. All right. Lots of little things can go through that we can charge for that. And then again, as things go up in cost, the margin goes down. And the idea being that if you blend everything through here, you should end up with that 47 to 50% gross profit margin when you use a matrix like this. This matrix has been updated in the last year. The type of parts that you are buying, the cost of parts is changing. Inflation has affected your cost of parts. And so we, as a coaching company, we continually research what our best practices clients are doing. And we have tweaked it a little bit to match what you're buying these days. A couple of things for those of you that might have seen some of these matrices before is the fact that we've gone to 80% and 75 in these lower end, which is a bit higher than in the past. And we have gone a little lower in a couple of these other areas here and spread some of these out just a little more, because you're tending to sell more parts that are getting into this $300 range, which is creating what we call an emotional bank account, right? You as a shop owner or you as a service advisor are like, oh, I don't know if I can charge for that. And we have to find a sort of smooth place there to make sure that you're getting your gross profit dollars and able to sort of compete in the marketplace. Now, when I say compete in the marketplace, I'm not talking about being the cheapest. I'm talking about what value do you bring and what price do you charge for what you bring. The shops that are making a 50% gross profit on parts are giving their clients a very good experience, nice waiting rooms, courtesy cars. They have the latest in technology, tools and equipment and things like that. Really, really nice waiting rooms and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, the client is receiving value for the maybe additional charges that some of these parts might be that differentiating you from somebody else. So this is the tool that we would use to achieve that gross profit margin, put it into place. If you find that you're doing a lot more parts in a lower area, maybe you tweak this one up a little bit. You can always adjust these a little bit to find that 47% to 50% range that we're looking for. So this leads us to talk a little bit about how to add value. Now, you might say to yourself, I have to match the suggested list price from my supplier, or I have to match the MSRP from the new car dealership that I'm buying my parts from. At the end of the day, nowadays, for at least the last 20 years, suggested list in the jobber world is really an irrelevant number. If you compare 4 major jobber companies, a suggested list, or in the exactly identical part, it will be irrelevant because it'll all be a different number. It's a made-up number. MSRP at dealerships is also a made-up number. One of my clients in the Vancouver area reached out to 6 different Ford dealerships for his cost on a part, the parts department MSRP, and the suggested list on that invoice, and he got 6 different numbers on each of those numbers from the 4 dealerships, right? So they're doing what they have to do to maintain their profitability. So the important thing for everybody listening is that you choose the margin that will give you the profit that you need to maintain your business, and then you learn to add value to that part, all right, to your client. What do I mean by that? Well, we order parts for the proper fit, form, finish, and function. We don't order parts where we have to grind out casting marking so that it actually fits properly, and so now it takes a half an hour longer to actually do the job. We don't order parts that last for a short period of time, that wear out prematurely, right? We order parts that are the best quality for our client. I always teach that we source parts based on quality first, availability second, and then price being the last factor, right? Because that's the thing that our name has to stand behind these products that we put on our cars. The other thing we need to communicate to our clients, because we are a do-it-for-you shop, we're not a do-it-yourself shop, we do it for you. We have sourced the correct part. We all know how long it takes to actually get the right part on occasion because there are challenges with the supply chain, mistakes in catalogs, different things happen like that. So we've taken the time to source the correct part. We have had it delivered to our shop at no additional cost to the owner of the car, and we have insured it at no additional cost. Now, the word insurance is that whole warranty conversation. So when you think of buying a piece of electronics, right, at a Staples store, at a Costco, generally they offer you, or even on Amazon for that matter, they offer you a additional warranty or additional insurance, right? Now, generally, I don't buy it because the ratio of the dollar value to the product is, in my mind, not worth it. I'm going to take my chances that the product's going to last long enough that I'm going to be okay. But on certain things, I might buy the extra warranty. So, for example, when I was traveling a lot on the road, having a projector with me that was, in my carry-on, I did try to treat it carefully, but you needed something that was pretty robust. I would buy the additional insurance or warranty on my projectors because I knew that they were, not just being bolted to my ceiling of my basement, right? There's going to be challenges there. So the idea here is we in our industry, we don't charge extra for our warranties. So the question is, when you're thinking about it, about parts warranty, is it a warranty program or is it marketing? So let's just talk a little bit about parts warranties these days, and then I'm going to talk about the difference here between these two things. All right. So first of all, I'm observing in the Canadian market that the lowest baseline is getting to be 2-year 40,000 parts and service warranty. Parts and labor would be a term that some of you are more familiar with, right? Now, that's independent of what your supplier gives you. Now, in some cases, you have a loyal relationship with your supplier, and they're giving you a full year on the service side, the labor side, and then 2 years on the parts. I know that some parts are lifetime on the part and only 90 days on labor. There's a different mix of things that come from your different suppliers. Obviously, you want to negotiate the best you can for your client and yourself with your supplier. But at the end of the day, the warranty program facing forward is marketing. The warranty program offered by your supplier is the program that you're given. There's a pretty good movement in North America. The States is a bit ahead of us in Canada, but Canada has it already, where we're going towards a 3-year, 36,000 kilometer warranty, parts and labor, parts and service on everything, right? Very simple, no questions asked. It's not complicated. There may be a couple of exceptions on a couple of items, like maybe a used engine or a transmission or something like that if you do those. But for the most part, we're honoring that warranty regardless of what our suppliers are giving us. Now, you have to remember, those of you that have been around for a while, the industry has had, the 90 days parts and labor has been around for quite a while. And the research that I've been given by some of the parts manufacturers is that most parts fail, something like 95, 96% of parts fail in that 90 days, right? It's an engineering or a manufacturing calculation in terms of quality control and things like that. So at the end of the day, if your supplier is offering you 1-year parts and service, the chances of something breaking beyond that are not going to be that great. So if you want to offer a 3-year 60, then you need to be at that 50% gross profit margin so that you can self-insure or self-warranty the few items that may fail in that period of time. So wouldn't a client pay just a little bit more with something coming with a much larger warranty that you might be offering them? So here's a comparison between a low-cost brake job and a best quality brake job. This is an item that is very competitive. It's very, it's become a commodity in many cases. And so, the consumers don't always know what they're comparing. And so when I talk about show value to your client, these are the conversations that you need to have when people are asking you what kind of price, or can you match, or they can get it for cheaper. You need to ask them a few questions. All right. Left-hand side, low-cost brake job, $250. Pads and rotors are replaced, very low quality. We call that a pad slap in some marketplaces. Hubs and calipers are not cleaned and serviced. May come with a 90-day parts and labor warranty. Customer needs to get their own ride. They have to wait for the vehicle. The wheels have handprints on them. Steering wheel has greasy fingerprints on it. Floor mat has dirt on it from the mechanic's boots. And who knows if those pads even last a year or 2 years with 25,000 kilometers. Versus a best quality front brake job, pads and rotors are replaced with the best quality. Hubs and calipers are clean and serviced. Comes with a 2-year, 40,000 kilometer parts and labor warranty. Shop offers either shuttle, courtesy car, pickup delivery, after hours drop off. Car is washed, vacuumed, wheels are polished, tires are dressed. The car is way cleaner then after the work was done, then it arrived, right? People don't even recognize their car when they come to the parking lot to pick it up because it looks so different than when they dropped it off. And then the brake pads are now lasting, 3-4 years, maybe even up to 80,000 kilometers, depending on the type of the vehicle. Is that not worth $200 more, not only for that experience, for that quality, for that peace of mind, but the fact that chances are this customer is going to pay $500 in the space of time that this person paid $450, and then be without their car for an additional day, the hassle of having to get a ride, and the rest of it. I understand that there are people who are cheap, or that there are people who are financially challenged, and they only have $250. Well, you need to begin to think about what is the primary level of client that you're attracting, right? I don't mean to be rude here, but we need to be attracting people who are willing to pay for the best quality, the best experience, so that they're happy and we maintain that profitability. So the question always comes up around this time in my classes to do with parts margin is, what about dealer parts? Do I put the dealer parts through the same matrix? What happens if the customer phones the dealer and finds out that the MSRP is lower than what I did with my matrix, right? And we get all worked up and we get all stressed out about dealer parts, right? Why can't we charge more than the parts department MSRP? Let me address this before I ask my next question. We all need to understand that new car dealers are 3 businesses within one building, and they compete with each other. There's the sales department, there's the parts department, and there's the service department. The parts department and the service department do not give deals to the sales department, or they try not to, unless they're forced by the dealer principal, to give deals on parts to fix up other cars. Each department has to be profitable on its own legs, which means that the service department is buying parts from the parts department, just like you as an aftermarket shop are buying it from the parts department. Now you assume that that service department is going to charge the same MSRP that is coming out of that parts department, and in many cases, unfortunately this is not a blanket statement, but it is so common, the advisors from dealerships that have come to the aftermarket, that the service department raises the price on the client's invoice, right? 15 to 20% are numbers that service advisors, ex-dealer service advisors have told me that they used to do to keep their service department profitable. So if you're asking somebody to match a dealer price, get them to get a written estimate from the service department before you begin to worry about what's happening. Now, there is an exception to what I'm saying that has been coming up recently, where dealers are giving some estimates to clients in writing with parts lower than your cost. It's not happening a lot, but it's happening on occasion. If you think about what's going on in our world with the tariffs and things like that, new car dealers are really having challenges with selling cars. They've had a few good months recently, but we know looking forward that there may be some really big challenges, which means that they have to find some ways to keep people coming in to their service departments and also people to come in to their sales department. So you might think to yourself, if a sales department is willing to lose money on a brake job, why would that be when in the past they never used to do that? That is because here's the stories we're hearing from consumers that we have been able to talk to after this experience. They go in for that brake job that's half the price of what it was before. You'd wonder why they wouldn't question that. Like, why wouldn't they say, so you've been ripping me off all these years, Mr. Dealer, and now you're going to give me a deal? But of course, the consumer doesn't really think that way. They go in for the brake job. The dealer offers them a huge free inspection, comes back to them with $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 worth of repairs on top of the brake job, and then they introduce them to the sales manager. Why don't we trade this car in on a new car? So they're using a bait and switch technique these days on these low costs. So please do not fall for that. If you can't make money on that brake job profitably the way you're learning from me, then why would you do it? You need to get asked questions and have your client ask questions and maybe warn them of the experience that they might have. You might lose that one brake job, but it's probably worth the exercise to send the client to the dealer and then report back to you on their experience there. I hate to go so negative in this world, but I just need you guys to be aware that these are some of the rare things that are happening, which is causing aftermarket shops to think they're too expensive. If you are not at a 20% net profit, you are not too expensive. There's something else going on behind the scenes at these new car dealers and maybe at other independents that you're wondering how can they charge that low. If it's too good to be true, ladies and gentlemen, it is too good to be true. Now, why do we order dealer parts? Well, on occasion, we've booked a vehicle in, we've committed to getting it done, we haven't sourced the parts earlier, we find out that we can't get it in the aftermarket or from jobbers, and in order to get the job done, we scramble and we get the dealer part. Sometimes it is a dealer-only part, a part that only comes from the manufacturer. Maybe it's a sensor, maybe it is some kind of a module that you can only get from them. Maybe you're ordering because the quality is better than the aftermarket. That is a trend that we have been watching this last while. And for those of you in the jobber world, you need to see the trending in my clients is they've probably increased their dealer purchases by close to 25% in the last year and a half. Something's going on in the aftermarket that somebody needs to address with that. So we order for the quality sometimes as well, right? Rarely do we order parts from the dealer because of the lower price, but maybe on occasion there is a deal to be had. Now I do want to differentiate between what I call a dealer part and a dealer selling jobber parts. For example, you can now call Ford up and you can buy brake parts for other makes and models of cars, not just Ford, right? I forget what the line is called. That's jobber parts. So if you phone a Ford dealership for a price on pads and rotors, you should be treating that price the same way you would treat it from any of the other jobbers that you deal with, right? When I talk about dealer parts, I'm talking about only what's available from the new car dealer or the quality that's available that we need. Now, one of the reasons why you may be challenged by the driving public or by your clients or by consumers about pricing is because you've told them that you've ordered the part from the dealer. And as soon as you tell them that, you now give them the ammunition to go and research what the part would be at the dealership. And of course, because they don't understand how it works, they go to the parts department and now they get a lower price than you're charging them. And it creates all kinds of doubt in their mind and then in your service advisor's mind or in your mind. So what we need to do is stop telling people where we source our parts. If somebody asks us where we get our parts, we say that we source them from several OES and OEM warehouses, original equipment supplier, original equipment manufacturer warehouses, and we always order parts based on quality first, availability second, and then the availability, and then the price is the last piece. We need to take a deep breath. We need to slow down. We don't always have to order dealer parts. Depends on what the circumstances are. Some of the aftermarket suppliers that are supporting you have some great quality stuff. You can order an import part from them and you open up their brand of box and inside is a part in a Toyota bag or in a BMW bag, right? You can get OE quality stuff from many of your jobbers, and you might complain, well, they don't stock enough of it, or I can't get it till the next day. Well, they have a lot of inventory to manage as well. Stop blaming them and maybe change your systems a little bit. All right. I'm going to tell you all a story of my early years in business and of a mistake that I made when it came to this whole idea of sourcing parts and meeting commitments and dealership parts and things like that. All right. So we were, my shop was in British Columbia. We were an air care certified repair center. So we had an emissions testing program where customers would go to the emissions test. If they failed, they would come to us for testing to identify the concern, and then we would do the repair. Friday afternoon at about 1 o'clock, the phone rings. Gentleman says, "Hey, my car's failed air care. Can I get it in to get it fixed?" First mistake, I said yes on a Friday afternoon. Second mistake I made, I didn't ask him when his insurance was expiring, because in BC at the time, the ability to renew your insurance was tied to your past emissions test, and I forgot to ask about that. He drops it off. We test it. We identify that it needs a fairly expensive part. We call him up. He says, "Wow, that's a lot of money. I need my car by tonight." I said, "Why?" He said, "Fixed because I got to take it back to the test before they close, so I can get my insurance." And I got all caught up in the panic. I called the dealership. I called the aftermarket. The dealership could get me the part right away. It was $900. I was going to make 90. I was going to make 10% on it back in the day before I knew about that much about matrices. And then the jobber part, which couldn't arrive till Monday, was going to be 450 suggested list. Again, I told you to ignore it, but just as an example, and it was going to cost me around $250. I was going to make $200 on basically the identical part, right? It was going to come from one of the suppliers that sold these OE replacements. Because I couldn't get the jobber part in time on the Friday, I felt guilty, and so I sold the dealer part to the guy for $810. I sold it to him at my cost because I felt guilty about the fact that I couldn't get that part that day. Now think about that, folks. How ridiculous is that? Why is that my fault that the part isn't available today? So let's rewind that story and let's do it the right way that I learned from one of my coaches, and I now coach my clients in. All right. First of all, the phone rings at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. You need to ask some questions, right? Have they failed an emissions test? Have they failed? Are they in the Maritimes? Are they due for their biannual inspection? Are they rushing off to the cabin trying to meet traffic? Like, find out what the stress levels are and see if you can actually meet and commit that. So let's go back to my scenario where I would say to the client, "Well, it's Friday afternoon, sir. The best we could do today is test it and identify the concern is, but we couldn't repair it. When is your insurance due?" "Well, sir, not sure if we're going to be able to get that done by tonight, so maybe you need to look into talking to your insurance agent for a weekend permit while we work on it." And back in those years, you could get a weekend permit for most cars for around $75. Pretty inexpensive. Once we identified what it needed, I could have called them up and said, "We can get your car done today." And I wouldn't have said that the part came from the dealer. I would just said, "The warehouse I have available today, I can get it done today, and your total is going to be $2,000. Or if you leave it over the weekend or get a permit for the weekend, we can do it on Monday, and your total invoice is going to be $1,700 or $1,500, a lot less." And I would explain that the part is identical. It's just that warehouse only delivers weekly, and that's the only time that I could get that in, right? Let the client make the choice of how to handle it. Remember, quality was the first consideration, availability was the second, and price was last. If the client was smart, they would have saved, $200 or $300 waiting for Monday, spent $75 on a permit, and they would have been fine. So I hope that helps everybody. Another issue that we find is some shops and some advisors keep wanting to be the hero with their customers and always looking for the cheapest price. They'll spend hours looking for the cheapest part to sell the customer. And, how much of a time waste is that? What's that doing to the quality issue of that part and to the work? But take a look at the math on the screen here for what you could be losing by just going for cheaper parts. All right. So let's say I buy a really inexpensive brake hose for $10. I divide it by 55%. If you remember the concept of the inverse number, for a 45% gross profit margin, I would sell the white box part for $18.18. All right. A better quality brake hose is $15 divided by 55% is 45% margin is $27.27. That's a $9 loss by going for a cheaper part, and the quality is not that great. Now, I have had people in my audience that have said, "Well, I buy these cheap ones and I sell it for $27.27. I do have an issue if you're buying the lower grade or the lower quality and trying to make 60, 70, 80 points on it. I don't think that's fair to the client. Now, if you can source through your research the same quality for $10 versus 15, then I would have no issue doing 10 to the 27.27, right? As long as the quality is there and you're offering that warranty that you can back that whole situation up. So just buying cheaper stuff can make you actually make less money. So you need to be really careful and find that balance of your cost and your profit and the quality of what you're purchasing. Tires is a bit of a challenge. Tire designs, EV tires, run flats, the sizes and the profiles that you buy today on cars. Tires are just so much more expensive relative to incomes, relative to prices of cars and stuff like that than ever before. The margins are tougher and tougher to achieve that we used to do years ago. Here's a matrix that we have from a couple of tire people in the industry that have helped us achieve that. In looking at all of my clients across the country, if you're doing 21 to 23 in the Maritimes, you're okay. If you can do 23 to 25 in the Maritimes, you're my hero. In Ontario, Quebec is more like the Maritimes. In Ontario, if you can do 25, you're doing okay. If you can get to 20, 26, 27, you're my hero there. And then in the prairies in Alberta, 28, 29, and BC is the same. For some reason, going further west, there is an ability to make a slightly better percentage margin on tires. And there's many circumstances that have caused that margin thing to be that way, which I won't go into for the sake of the course. But 25 to 28 is the goal that I have with my clients to achieve the gross profit on tires. Now, in addition to that, depends on the marketplace. Light truck can be a little more aggressive. There are some people still getting 28 to 30 on light truck tires. There's also a concept of an in-house road hazard program where this is probably a little low. I would probably go $12 to $20 on tires today per tire that they pay when they buy the tire. You lock that money away in an account, and then if they have a road hazard issue, you replace that tire for them at no cost, right? Obviously, you would have rules around that. You would have, tread depth would be a certain amount. Rotation maybe would be part of the program to prevent you from being abused. But at the end of the day, the research from the Western Tire Association is that these only use 1.5% to 2% of the fund in the long run anyways, when you do the self-insured road hazard warranty. Please don't pass along any discounts from any of your suppliers. It's the most common to get rebates from your tire suppliers, but even your programs with your jobbers, please do not pass those along. You've earned them for your loyalty and keep them. All right? Please do not discount install and balance, minimum of 1 hour for the 4, and many shops now are charging more service, more labor for larger sizes and low profile. So let's say, for example, standard passenger, standard steel wheel is going to be, $30 mountain balance per tire. So for 120, chances are the low profiles would be, 180. Bigger sizes would be 200, right, for a set of 4. So we highly recommend that. I like charging for stems and weights. Not everybody does, but it is a small profit center that you're using. And of course, we want to charge for TPMS reset these days. When I'm doing this in a context where I'm able to interact with my audience, I find that we are improving in the industry. More and more shops are charging for TPMS reset. The most common objection I get from owners and service advisors is, what if it's an easy one that resets itself when you drive around the block? What if it's one that takes 4 hours and 10 scan tools to finally get done on a BMW, right? I get this whole range. So what I suggest is you choose a dollar value for your marketplace. Eastern Canada, probably $19.99 is probably the lowest I've heard. And then when you go west, you can go up to like $35 in some cases. You get authorization for TPMS reset with every single estimate before you start. On the ones that are simple, that can be driven around the block, if you feel like you have to take it off, you just take it off the bill, and that person's bill is $20 less. the ones that are are harder to do, chances are if you just start charging something, you'll be further ahead than you are now, and then maybe you can create a habit of having a second menu for BMWs and other cars that take a little bit more. But the idea is to start with something and then remove it if you don't need it. Accept the fact that it's too low on a few cars. You'll be further ahead doing it consistently, and then you can begin to tweak how to charge for TPMS resets. So, another really big challenge that you are all facing is, why is the price from you, the shop, higher than what I can pay for it online or at a jobber store? All right. Now, of course, I've got the answer right on my screen at the bottom there, because that is the do-it-yourself price. All right. So you give an estimate to somebody for that brake job, and it's probably broken down into the different components, and they say, well, I phoned the jobber store, just in town here, and I can get it for less than what you're charging me. Or I can go to that jobber company online, or I can go to Rock Auto or Amazon and get it lower. And you have to realize, and you have to stand up for yourself, that is the do-it-yourself price. When these companies sell online, or they sell at a slightly lower price over the counter, the assumption is that it's a do-it-yourself price. So you have to challenge that person saying, so are you going to do the brake job yourself? All right. So the other example, or a similar example to this whole thing is let's say your cost from the jobber is 100, their suggested list is 150, your matrix makes it 159, but they sell it over the counter for 132 or something like that. It's a little bit less than their suggested list, and then you guys get all bent out of shape about that. That's the do-it-yourself price. I never hear restaurants complain that people can buy eggs at Costco, wholesale, right? You need to communicate that to your clients. I know that price is lower. Feel free to go buy it and do the brake job yourself. And let them decide what they're going to do. Stand up for yourselves, right? Restaurants don't allow you, they don't get all bent out of shape about this stuff. They all know that we cook at home. In fact, this is probably a good analogy. Very few people can do their own work. It seems like it's more than it is, but very few people can do their own work on their cars. But almost all of us can at least cook an egg, with a few exceptions. And restaurants don't worry that they're going to go broke because people can cook their own eggs, right? There's a reason why we go to restaurants for breakfast and for brunch. We don't want to clean up the dishes. We're traveling. We have meetings. There's all kinds of things like that. There's always a marketplace for a do-it-for-you situation. And then lastly, the whole topic of parts supplied by the customer. This is a real challenge for all of you. Other industries don't do it, but for some reason, ours has evolved to allow it to happen. And we won't go into all of the history of why. It is a challenge, and we need to stand up to it and deal with it. All right? So, on the screen here, we have a shop that is at $135 an hour. Their technicians are 90% productive, 125% efficient, which means that they effectively collect $151.88 at a parts to service ratio of $151.88, $13.50 for materials and consumables. Total revenue is $317. Take away the technician wage, the cost of the part. At the end of the whole conversation, they are generating $190.34 per hour of gross profit dollars per hour. Now, we haven't touched on that topic yet, maybe a little bit in our service conversation, but this is a really important number for all of you to be tracking in your business. What is your gross profit dollars per hour? Now, some of you allow people to bring parts, but you charge a little bit more service, a little bit more labor. So in the case of this shop, they do $150 here for the service rate for customer supplied parts, and they end up with a gross profit per hour of $140. So they're still short $50 an hour on gross profit. So the math to help you achieve your gross profit is you have to take your 135 or whatever number you're at and multiply it by 1.6 to achieve the same gross profit if you don't supply the part, which means that this shop would have to charge $216 an hour for customer supplied parts. At that point, it doesn't make any sense anymore for anybody. Well, maybe for you, but I mean, why would the customer even bother to do that? All right. Now, I remember stopping doing it. So let me give you a bit of advice on if you're doing it, how to stop it. Some people are just doing cold turkey and stopping. But in many cases, I just started telling people I charge you by the hour as long as your car is here. If you bring me the wrong part, I'll charge you by the hour while you go and get the right part. And that usually discourages most people from doing it. But I've learned some more things from my day in the modern era. And one of my clients just told me a story recently of a customer supplied part, and they ended up having to pay out after an accident. So, a couple of things. In some provinces and states, you're obligated to give warranty 90 days parts and service regardless of who supplied the part. So the question would be, why would you even allow that if you have to warranty it, right? Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta are the ones that fall under that as far as I know. So when it comes to customer supplied parts, it's loss of profitability. There's liability issues. It's happening more in the United States, but it's coming to Canada where insurance companies are not paying on customer supplied part on big claims, right? If that caliper fails, the car crashes and kills someone, they're going to wash their hands of you because they had nothing to do with that chain of insurance. There's probably better language than what I'm going to use in terms of the insurance world. But at the end of the day, there's a chain of insurance that happens when you buy a part from your supplier, and it works its way all the way back through the chain, and all the insurance companies along that chain will cover you, yours and the part supplier and the factory and everything. Whereas when a customer brings that part, they don't have that kind of insurance, and that chain of liability is broken. So you have to be very careful when it comes to really serious accidents. This one shop was sued for a lot of money. Insurance wouldn't cover it because the customer supplied part. You can't offer a warranty properly. It damages your reputation. It's frustration and hassle. The question I always have for you guys is, what business are you in? Are we a full service do it for you, or are we a person who enables do-it-yourselfers, right? If you have attracted a whole lot of enthusiasts and do-it-yourselfers at your shop, and they keep wanting you to match the price, you've attracted the wrong clientele for the profitability that you need to have to be in business. Other industries don't do it. Why do we? So we need to stop one shop at a time. So here's an example of an estimate done with my truck. In a particular marketplace with a jobber store and that company's online presence in that area code. The shop, this was the retail price through their matrix, $220 for the service, $155 for the pads, rotors, materials and consumables for a total of $824. If a warranty happened 2 year $40,000, I would have needed to pay nothing. If the shop would have done the 1.6 because of the customer supplied part, it would have been $352, $115 for matching the price of the pads and rotors, materials and consumables for a total of $877.41. It's actually $53 more to allow the customer supplied parts if you're charging properly for your service. Now, so the perceived savings is actually it's not a savings. They think they're saving $95, but it's actually costing them $52 more. But if there's a warranty issue, it's going to be another close to $400 to redo those brakes if they have to go get those pads and rotors again. So here's the thing: the customer supplied part savings was only $95 on an $824 brake job, just over 11%. Why couldn't you explain to the client that, why don't you let us supply it? Comes with a 2 year 40,000 kilometer warranty, and we'll look after you, right? Obviously, if they're financially challenged or if they're super cheap people, they're still trying to get that $95 somewhere. But at the end of the day, I think most reasonable people would be like, really? The difference between the online part and what you're charging me is only $95 for the pads and the rotors. And I get a 2 year 40,000 kilometer peace of mind warranty, and my car was washed and everything. At the end of the day, I believe you will be able to convince people. Are there exceptions to this? Of course there are. There's always exceptions to this, but for the most part, the savings that they get is not as great as they think or as you might think that it is. So being in business is about creating net profit. In order to create net profit, you need to create gross profit dollars. Where are the gross profit dollars going to come from? Primarily, your gross profit dollars are going to come from service and parts. The margin has to come from somewhere. You have to figure out, we need a 70 to 75% gross profit margin on service. We need a 45 to 50% gross profit on parts. After we pay all of our expenses, we should have 20% left over. We have to find a way to charge properly for what we do, show the value, and offer our clients a great experience. Stop undercharging for your service and for your parts. Ignore our MSRP, ignore suggested list. The key word in there is S, is suggested. Charge what you need to be profitable, and then add the value, the experience that your clients would need on the parts, and this problem will go away. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this chapter.